The humid air of the Vietnam jungle clings to every inch of your existence, wrapping around you like a suffocating blanket. Every breath feels like you're inhaling something dark and ancient. Sergeant Jackson stands at the head of the briefing room, his hard features outlined by the flicker of the overhead lights. He surveys his squad with a stern gaze. 6 men, all battle-hardened, but each carrying their own unique cracks beneath the surface. Corporal Allen leans back in his chair, his rifle propped against his leg. "Another day of sweating our balls off, hey, Sarge?" he says as he pops his cigar back into his mouth. "Well, at least you can't complain about getting them wet now, can you?" Sergeant Jackson says, giving him a stern look. "All right now, let's save the jokes for later. We got shit to do. Now, this one's deep in contested territory. Recon says we've got enemy movement in the area. We are to confirm or deny those reports. Stick together, stay quiet, and stay alive. Got it?" "Yes, Sarge," the guys call out. "All right, dismissed." PFC Pierce, the youngest of the group, shifts nervously, his hands fidgeting with the strap of his helmet. "Hey, you good, kid?" asks Specialist Rodriguez, the squad's muscle and unofficial big brother. "Yeah, it's just," Pierce hesitates. "The jungle at night, man. Feels like the damn trees are watching you." "Well then, you better hope you don't need to take a piss. Last thing we need is the trees dying of laughter," Allen says, smiling as he walks by them. The squad laugh as they gather their things and head out for the mission. The walk through the jungle was uneventful at first. The squad moved silently, their boots crunching the damp undergrowth. Hours pass before things start to go wrong. First, their compass seems to malfunction. The radio starts crackling with bursts of static that prevent any communication, and before they know it, they realize they are lost. "Hey, Sarge," Corporal Allen says in a hushed voice. "We need to find cover. If the enemy's out here, we're sitting ducks." Sergeant Jackson nods in agreement. "Okay, spread out, but stay within earshot. Look for anything that can keep us hidden until dawn." After searching for a bit, Pierce calls out, waving his flashlight toward a thicket of vines. "Over here," he says. Behind the curtain of greenery, a yawning steel entrance comes into view, rusted but imposing. "A bunker," Rodriguez says. "Looks like it's been here for a while," PFC Morales says, brushing away dirt from a faded piece of metal on the door. "This looks Vietnamese." "No shit, Sherlock, we are in Vietnam," Rodriguez says. "Doesn't matter who built it," Sarge interrupts. "It'll keep us alive tonight. Move in." The squad enters, their boots echoing in the damp, narrow corridor. The air inside is stale and heavy, carrying a faint metallic tang. PFC Pierce shudders, rubbing his arms. "Feels cold in here compared to outside," he mutters. "Less talking, more looking," Sarge says. They enter a central chamber filled with overturned desks, decaying papers, and a thick layer of dust. Rodriguez picks up a crumpled piece of paper, squinting at the faded text. "What's it say?" Allen asks. "I don't know. It's in Vietnamese," Rodriguez shrugs as he throws it back on the table. The squad starts setting up for the night, but a creeping unease settles over them. The bunker's silence wasn't the kind that came with abandonment. It was a waiting silence, charged and expectant. Pierce sits near the entrance, his rifle resting on his lap. "This place, it doesn't feel right." "No place feels right in this war, kid," Allen says, rolling out his pack. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's gonna suck." But none of them could shake the sensation that they weren't alone. The air inside the bunker was heavy, pressing down like a lead blanket. Most of the squad had finally dozed off, their exhaustion overpowering the eerie atmosphere. All except Rodriguez, who sat against the wall, wide awake. "Damn MREs," he mutters to himself, his stomach churning slightly. He stands and grabs his rifle. "Be back in a few," he mutters to no one in particular, though Sarge stirs slightly at the movement. The corridors were darker than he expected. His flashlight cuts through the oppressive darkness in thin, weak beams. Rusted pipes line the walls, dripping water that echoes in the silence. Rodriguez takes a deep breath, his steps sounding more deliberate as he ventures further. As he turns a corner, a chill runs up his spine. The sensation was immediate, an awareness that something was behind him. He stops, his flashlight swaying slightly in his trembling hand. "Hey, ¿quién está ahí?" he calls out in Spanish, his voice low and firm. "Who's there?" No answer. Rodriguez chuckles and shakes his head. Just your imagination, hermano. The makeshift bathroom wasn't far, just a small alcove with a drain in the floor. He set his rifle down within arm's reach and goes about his business, but the unease doesn't leave him. His ears strain for sounds beyond the drips of water and the shuffling of his own movements. As he finished, he thought he heard a faint, unnoticeable whisper. "Rodriguez." For a moment, he freezes before picking up his rifle. "Who's there?" he calls out, his voice echoing sharply in the confined space. Nothing. The only response is the soft drip of water from the pipes. He stands there for a long moment, his heart racing before shaking his head. "You're hearing things, dipshit," he mutters to himself. Rodriguez makes his way back to the central chamber quickly, his back straight and his eyes darting to every shadow. When he rejoins the others, the room feels different, quieter than before. Pierce stirs slightly as Rodriguez sits down. "Bathroom break or hunting ghosts?" he mutters sleepily. "Shut up and go to sleep," Rodriguez snapped, settling back into his pack. The others didn't notice how tightly he gripped his rifle, or how long it took him to close his eyes. Sarge was the first to get up, his internal clock as reliable as ever. "All right, fuckers, get up," he barks, his voice echoing in the room. As the guys stir, each moaning and groaning about stiff backs and needing to pee, Sarge gestures towards the deeper corridors. "We need to figure out where we are and what we're dealing with. Check for maps, supplies, anything that can give us intel. We move in pairs. Pierce, you're with me. Alan, take Morales. Rodriguez and Carter, you're together." Rodriguez's lips tighten, his unease from the night before still lingering. The team spread out, flashlights cutting through the gloom. Rodriguez and Carter moved down a corridor lined with rooms, most of them stripped bare. "This place creeps me out," Carter mutters, his usual bravado tempered by the bunker's eerie stillness. "Yeah," Rodriguez replies, his voice low. He hesitates, then adds, "Last night, man, I thought I heard something." Carter stopped. "Heard what?" Rodriguez looks at him, eyes squinting before saying, "Nothing. Forget it." They stepped into the next room. The flashlight beam landed on something unusual. A faded map pinned to the wall, marked with handwritten notes written in Vietnamese. Below it, a dusty reel-to-reel recorder sat on a metal table. "What do you think this is?" Carter asked, brushing off the dust. "Looks like it still works," Rodriguez says, flipping a switch. The recorder sputters to life, its motor whining as the tape begins to play. A scratchy voice fills the room, speaking in hurried, panicked Vietnamese. Though Rodriguez and Carter don't understand the words, the tone was unmistakable. Fear. The recording ends abruptly, leaving the room in silence. Rodriguez and Carter exchange uneasy glances. "We should get this back to Sarge," Rodriguez says. Carter nods. "Yeah, let's not stay here any longer than we have to." As they turned to leave, Rodriguez paused. In the dim light, he thought he saw a shadow shift out of the corner of his eye. The squad reconvened in the central chamber. Sarge stands with his arms crossed, his face as unreadable as ever, while the others trickle back in. "Report," he barks, his voice breaking the silence. Pierce steps forward, holding a dusty metal box. "Found some old medical supplies. Half of it's useless, but there's a couple of morphine shots still sealed. Could be handy." "Good," Sarge nods. "Alan?" Alan holds up a rusted canteen and a small, faded journal. "Not much, Sarge. Just this old journal that looks like someone used to keep notes. Though it's in Vietnamese, Morales thinks it's worth looking through if we get downtime." Sarge glanced at Morales, who gives a curt nod. "It's old, but the writing's still legible. Could tell us what this place was used for." Finally, Rodriguez and Carter step forward with the map and recorder. Carter hands the map to Sarge while Rodriguez sets the recorder down on the floor. "This thing still works," Rodriguez says, his voice tight. "It's got a recording on it. Vietnamese again, but whoever made it wasn't having a good time." Sarge frowns, crouching to inspect the recorder. "Play it." Rodriguez hesitates, his finger hovering over the switch, the memory of the panicked voice sending a chill down his spine. but he nods and flips the switch. The room fills with a scratchy, frantic voice, its rising tone clawing at the squad's nerves. Though no one could understand the words, the fear was palpable. When it ended, a heavy silence falls over the group. What the hell were they so afraid of? Carter mutters, his usual confidence shaken. Sarge stands back up, his expression grim. Doesn't matter. Whoever it was, they're long gone. We're using this place for cover until we can figure a way back to friendly lines. Everyone, stay sharp. The squad settles in for another night, though the unease of the morning lingers. Sarge assigns watches, ensuring there's always someone awake, but sleep doesn't come easy for anyone. Rodriguez lays back on his pack, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, when a sudden noise breaks the silence. A faint tapping, like fingers drumming on metal. He sits up, his heart pounding. "Carter?" he whispers, looking at his sleeping companion. The tapping stops. He strains his ears, but the sound doesn't return. With a sigh, he lays back down. "It's nothing, cabrón," he tells himself. In another corner of the bunker, Pierce stirs in his sleep, a frown creasing his face. His dreams are filled with strange images, shadows moving in the jungle, whispers that seem to come from nowhere. He wakes with a start, sitting up and breathing heavy. His eyes dart around the room, but nothing is out of place. "Just a dream," he whispers, running a hand through his hair. But as he lays back down, he feels it, a cold breath on the back of his neck. By dawn, the squad was still on edge. The night had been quiet on the surface, but everyone felt more tense. While everyone was busy eating, lost in their own thoughts, Alan breaks the silence. "Anyone else feel off last night?" he asks, his voice casual but probing. Pierce looks up but says nothing. Morales shifts uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding eye contact. "Just nerves," Sarge says, his tone dismissive. "This place has a vibe, but that's all it is. Don't let it mess with your head." Rodriguez opens his mouth to speak, but thinks better of it. He wasn't ready to admit what he'd heard, or thought he heard. "All right," Sarge says, standing. "We're moving deeper today. Find out what else this place has to offer. Same pairs as yesterday. Let's move." As they prepare to leave, the feeling of being watched creeps over them. The bunker seemed darker than it had the day before, the shadows longer and the silence heavier. The squad split into pairs again, their footsteps echoing in the desolate corridors of the bunker. Sarge moves alone into one of the corridors, his confidence shielding him from the unease gripping the others. He walks down a narrow hallway, the beam of his flashlight slicing through the stale air. His senses are heightened, tuned for danger, but nothing moves except the occasional rat scurrying along the edges of the walls. His flashlight passes over a rusted door slightly ajar. Frowning, he pushes it open with the barrel of his rifle. Inside, the air is heavier, mustier, carrying a faint metallic tang. The room is small, barely more than a storage closet, with shelves lining the walls. Scattered papers cover the floor, along with broken jars and what looked like a smashed lantern. Sarge picks up a sheet of paper and holds it to the light. The writing was faded, but the symbols were unmistakable. An ominous mix of crosses and circles, crude sketches of human figures contorted in agony. "Superstitious shit," he grunts, throwing the paper aside. As he turns to leave, a faint sound catches his attention, a soft rustling, like fabric brushing against stone. He freezes, his instincts kicking in. "Rodriguez! Pierce!" he calls out, his voice steady. No response. The rustling grows louder, coming from the far corner of the room. Sarge swings his flashlight towards the noise, but the beam illuminates nothing but shadows. Then the shadows shift. At first, it's subtle, like a trick of the light, but as he squints, the darkness seems to pull together, blending into a vague humanoid shape. 2 pinpricks of light flare where its eyes should have been. Sarge raises his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Who's there?" he says. The shape doesn't move. Instead, the air around him grows colder, biting through his fatigues. His breath puffs out in white clouds as the sound of a low, guttural growl fills the room. He fires a warning shot. The guns roar deafening in the small space, but when the smoke clears, the figure is gone. Sarge stands motionless, his pulse pounding in his ears. The room is silent again, except for the dripping from the pipes. Just the wind, he says under his breath, but his voice lacks its usual conviction. When Sarge rejoins the others in the central chamber, his expression is unreadable. "Everything all right, Sarge?" Alan asks, noticing the tension in his posture. "Fine," Sarge snaps. He looks at Rodriguez, who is fiddling with the recorder. "Anything new?" "Still trying to clean up the audio, Sarge," Rodriguez said, not looking up. Sarge nods, but says nothing more. He doesn't mention the shadows, the growl, or the unnatural cold. The last thing his squad needed was their leader rattled. Rodriguez breaks the silence. "This thing's busted. All I'm getting is static and maybe some interference, like a voice, but it's too faint to make out." Pierce leans back against the wall, his eyes darting to Sarge, who hasn't said a word since his return. The sergeant's usual confident stride was stiff, and his face was pale, beads of sweat glistening off his forehead despite the cool air. "Hey, Sarge," Alan calls out, trying to sound casual. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarge stops pacing and shoots him a sharp glance. "I'm fine, just keeping watch. You should try it sometime, Alan, instead of running your mouth." Alan raises his hands in mock surrender, but his smirk fades as Sarge turns away again, his hand unconsciously gripping the rifle tighter. Rodriguez leans closer to Alan and lowers his voice. "You see that? He's jumpy. Never seen him like this." "Yeah," Alan whispers back. "Something spooked him. Think he's going to talk about it." Pierce chimes in, his voice barely audible. "Not a chance. Guy's too proud. But whatever's got him shook, it's not nothing." The three exchange uneasy glances, the tension between them palpable. Later, as the squad prepares to move deeper into the bunker, Alan finds himself walking alongside Rodriguez at the rear of the group. "You ever seen Sarge like that before?" he asks quietly. "No," Rodriguez says, shaking his head. "Guy's a rock, even when the bullets are flying. Whatever's eating him, it's not normal." Alan hesitates before saying what they both were thinking. "You believe all that crap about this place being haunted?" Rodriguez shrugs, his usual bravado broken by the bunker's oppressive atmosphere. "I don't know, man, but if it's enough to rattle Sarge, maybe we should start paying attention." Ahead of them, Sarge's voice rings out. "Pick up the pace, ladies. This place isn't going to search itself." Alan looks at Rodriguez, then back at Sarge's rigid back. "Yeah," he mutters. "Paying attention sounds like a good idea." The squad moves into another section of the bunker, the corridors narrowing as the air grows colder. Sarge takes the lead, his jaw set in determination, but his grip on his rifle betraying his tension. Behind him, the squad whispers amongst themselves, their unease growing. They didn't know what Sarge had seen, but one thing was clear: the walls of the bunker weren't the only thing hiding secrets. The squad moved deeper into the bunker, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air grew damp, and a faint metallic scent lingered, as if the very walls remembered the bloodshed of years past. Pierce takes point this time, his eyes scanning the narrow corridor ahead. "I don't like this," he mutters, his voice barely a whisper. "Join the club," Alan replies from the middle of the line, his voice filled with sarcasm, but lacking its usual punch. Rodriguez brought up the rear, muttering to himself in Spanish. Sarge remained silent, his eyes flicking to every shadow as though expecting something to leap out at any moment. As they rounded a corner, their flashlights land on a heavy steel door, partially open. The faint sound of dripping water echoes from the within. Pierce stops, his hand raised. "You hear that?" The squad falls silent, the faint dripping filling the void. "Just water," Sarge says curtly, stepping forward and pushing the door open. Inside was a small room, its walls lined with rusting shelves. A table sat in the center, cluttered with what looked like abandoned personal effects, dog tags, letters, a tarnished cigarette case. Pierce moved cautiously to the table, picking up a set of dog tags. "Looks like this was some kind of, break room," he says. Rodriguez leans against the doorway, keeping watch. Break room? Feels more like a tomb. As Pierce sifts through the items on the table, something catches his eye. A folded yellow piece of paper. He opens it, revealing a scrawled message in jagged handwriting. "Leave. This place is cursed. His breath hitches as he holds it up. Sarge, you might want to take a look at this. Sarge takes the paper, his eyes scanning the words. His face remained unreadable, but his grip tightens, crumbling the note slightly. Probably just some scared kid trying to mess with us, he says, tossing it back on the table. Before anyone could respond, a sudden clang echoes from the corridor behind them. Rodriguez spins around, his flashlight darting over the walls. What the hell was that? The sound comes again, louder this time, like metal scraping against metal. All right, everyone stay sharp, Sarge orders, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Rodriguez edges out into the corridor, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. If one of you is messing with me, I swear. His words are cut off as his beam caught movement at the edge of the hall. Something small and quick darted across the corridor. Guys, I see something, he hisses, his heart pounding. The squad crowds into the doorway, their flashlights scanning the hallway. There's nothing there, Rodriguez, Alan says, though his voice shakes. No, Rodriguez says. I swear, it was like a shadow. Before anyone could reply, the door they had just exited slams shut with a deafening bang. The squad spins around, their flashlights now fixed on the sealed door. Sarge rushes forward, yanking at the handle, but it won't budge. Pierce, give me a hand, he barks. As the two of them work to force the door open, the lights of their flashlights begin to flicker. The dripping sound grows louder, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Rodriguez backs up against the wall, his breathing shallow, his flashlight swinging back and forth wildly, catching fleeting glimpses of shadows shifting where they shouldn't, moving against the light. Guys, he whispers, his voice trembling. It's here with us. The words send a chill through the group, and for the first time, Sarge looks genuinely afraid. The flickering lights sputtered once, twice, and then fail completely, plunging the corridor into an oppressive darkness so complete it seems to swallow sound itself. Hold position, Sarge barks, his voice a lifeline in the dark. A guttural scream rips through the blackness, freezing everyone in place. It was Pierce. His cry of pain is cut short with a sickening thud. Pierce, Rodriguez shouts, panic breaking through his voice. Get your fucking flashlights on now, Sarge yells, his hands fumbling with his gear. Alan curses under his breath as he slaps his flashlight, desperate for it to spark back to life. The sounds of shifting, scuffling, and heavy breathing fill the corridor. For a moment, it felt like the darkness itself was alive, wrapping around them, suffocating them. Finally, one by one, the flashlights come back to life, their weak beams cutting through the room. Jesus, Rodriguez mutters, his light swinging wildly until it lands on Pierce, laying on the floor. Pierce was laying face down, motionless. Sarge was the first to reach him, rolling him onto his back. His face was destroyed. His left cheek was ripped from his ear down to his lower jaw, his teeth and tongue exposed in a grotesque manner. Pierce, Sarge yells, shaking him. Wake up, soldier. Alan crouches down, his hands reaching toward his neck to check his pulse. Is he? He's gone, Sarge says, laying him back down. What the fuck happened? I told you, man, Rodriguez hissed, his flashlight darting nervously around the corridor. There's something in here with us. As they crouched around Pierce, a cold draft swept through the corridor, carrying with it a faint whisper, low and unintelligible, like the murmurs of a crowd just out of earshot. Did you hear that? Alan asked, his voice barely audible. Shut up, Sarge snapped, but his eyes looking into the shadows that lingered just beyond the reach of their flashlights. The squad exchanged uneasy glances. All right, listen up, Sarge says, his voice shaky but low. We stick together from here on out. No wandering off, no splitting up. You need to take a shit, you take a partner. You hear me? But we are not losing anyone else. Got it? The squad nods, though their fear was palpable. Rodriguez shines his flashlight around the corridor. His stomach drops. The door that had slammed shut earlier was now wide open, but standing in the doorway was a figure, a silhouette that didn't move, didn't breathe, and didn't seem entirely human. Sarge? Rodriguez whispers, his voice barely audible. Sarge follows his gaze, and for a long, terrible moment, no one moves. The figure tilts his head, as if curious, and then steps back into the shadows, disappearing completely. "Move," Sarge commands, his voice tight. "We're getting the fuck out of here. Now." The squad's frantic retreat through the bunker ended abruptly when the cool night air hits their faces. They burst into the jungle, their flashlights piercing the dense tree line. "Finally," Alan gasped, gripping his rifle tightly. "Keep moving," Sarge ordered, scanning the dark tree line. "We need to put some distance between us and that hellhole." But just as the group starts to catch their breath, the crack of a branch sounded to their right. Everyone froze, weapons snapping up in unison. "Identify yourself," Sarge yells out. A figure darts between the trees, its movement deliberate but panicked. "Contact," Rodriguez shouts. Alan moves like lightning, flanking the figure while Sarge and Rodriguez cut off its retreat. Within minutes, they had their subject, a wiry enemy soldier, trembling and wide-eyed. "Get him down," Sarge orders. The soldier didn't resist much, though his breaths came in short, terrified gasps. His uniform was filthy, and his face was streaked with sweat and grime. He muttered something in his native tongue, his voice rising and falling like a prayer. "Great," Alan mutters. "We've got ourselves a whiny little bitch to add to the fun." "Shut it," Sarge snaps. "Back inside. We'll interrogate him where we have cover." The soldier's demeanor changes the moment they drag him back to the bunker's entrance. His resistance is immediate, frantic. He dug his heels into the dirt, his eyes wide with terror. No, go in," he screams in broken English, his voice cracking. Sarge yanked him forward, forcing him into the dark corridor. "You don't get a choice." The moment they stepped inside, the soldier's fear turns primal. He clawed at the walls, shaking his head violently. "Evil. No understand. Evil." "What is he talking about?" Alan asked, gripping his rifle tighter. The prisoner thrashed, shouting now. "Dead. All dead. No leave. They no leave." Sarge pins the soldier against the wall, his patience thinning. "Talk. Now." The soldier was panting, tears streaking his face. He spoke in fragments, his English broken but desperate. "Bunker. Haunted. Bad spirits. Kill men. They no escape. Stay forever." "Ay, Dios mío," Rodriguez whispers to himself. "What does he mean? Stay forever?" Alan asked, his voice uneasy. "Trap you," the soldier said, his voice quivering. "You walk out. But door. It gone." Sarge's jaw tightens. "Nonsense. We just walked out, didn't we?" The soldier shook his head frantically. "You try now. Door gone." Everyone's skeptical, but Sarge orders Rodriguez and Alan to check the entrance. The two jog out of sight, only to return a few minutes later, their faces pale. Sarge?" Alan says with a shaky voice. "The door's not there." "Fuck you mean, not there?" Sarge growls, moving past them. When they reached the spot where the exit had been, the squad froze. The wall was seamless, as if the door had never existed. "No, no," the prisoner screams, collapsing to his knees. "I tell you, no leave now." A chill settles over the group, heavier than the jungle humid air. Sarge's resolve faltered as he stares at the wall. "This has to be a fucking joke," he says. From the depths of the bunker, the faint sound of footsteps echo, a slow, deliberate cadence that sends shivers down their spines. Alan raises his rifle in a protective stance. "Sarge, what do we do now?" Sarge doesn't answer, his eyes fixed on the dark corridor behind them as the footsteps grow louder. Sarge turns to the others with a renewed determination. "Listen up. We are not dying in this hole. We'll find another way out." Alan shakes his head, his voice shaky. "Sarge, the exit's gone. It's like that shit never existed." "Then we find another way out," Sarge snaps back. "Start looking for air vents, an emergency hatch. Fuck, even a weak spot on the goddamn wall we can blow through. Nothing's indestructible." Rodriguez shoots a glance at the prisoner, who was mumbling prayers in his native tongue. "And him, Sarge? What do we do with him?" "He comes with us. It's obvious he knows something about his place, and I'm not about to let him out of my damn sight. Sarge shuts his eyes and takes a deep breath. All right, we're splitting into pairs. Rodriguez, take Alan and sweep the west corridor. I'll take Morales and the prisoner and head east. The rest of you stay here and see what the fuck happened to the door. Report anything immediately. I don't give a shit how small. You hear? The groups move cautiously through the bunker, their flashlights casting long shadows on the walls. The air feels heavier with each step, as if the bunker itself was pressing in on them. Rodriguez and Alan take the west corridor, their boots echoing ominously. Sarge and Morales head east, the prisoner stumbling between them. Keep sharp, Sarge warns Morales, who nods silently, rifle at the ready. As they move deeper, the bunker seems to come alive, the faint sound of whispers floating through the air, the shadows moving on the edge of their vision. Rodriguez and Alan find themselves in what looks like a storage room. Metal shelves line the walls, covered in rust and a thick layer of dust. Check those shelves, Rodriguez says in a low voice. Alan nods and moves cautiously. As he reached for a rusted toolbox, it flies off the shelf, slamming into the wall behind them with a deafening crash. Jesus, Alan screams, spinning around. The fuck was that? Rodriguez says as he raises his weapon, flashlight sweeping the room. Before Alan can answer, the lights go out, plunging the room into darkness. Rodriguez? Alan yells out, panic setting in. I'm here, Rodriguez says, his voice shaking. Then before he can say another word, a low growl sounds from the far corner of the room, making both men nearly piss themselves. Meanwhile, Sarge and Morales find themselves in a narrow corridor. The air is thick and stifling. This place is a damn maze, Morales mutters. Stay focused, Morales, Sarge says in a hushed voice. As they reach a dead end, the prisoner begins to mutter frantically, pulling against Sarge's grip. Quiet, Sarge snaps. But the prisoner's panic grows as he points to the wall ahead. No safe, Sarge. No safe, he says, his eyes wide with fear. Before Sarge can respond, the wall in front of them begins to ripple, like water disturbed by a pebble. From the distortion, a face emerges, a gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched into a silent scream. Morales stumbles back. What the fuck is that? The face shoots towards them, and Sarge shoves Morales aside and drags the prisoner with them as they retreat down the corridor away from this thing. Rodriguez, report, Sarge barks into his radio. Static is the only answer back. Then, Alan's voice crackles through faintly. We. Something. Can't. Alan, say again. The static grows in intensity before cutting off. God damn it, Sarge yells. The bunker shakes with the weight of unseen forces as every corner seems to come alive with whispers, shadows, and a sense of doom. Sarge and Morales stumble into a junction, dragging the prisoner with them, his wild screams echoing through the corridors as he fights against their grip. What the fuck is happening, Sarge? Morales shouts over the chaos. It's like the damn bunker is alive. Keep moving, soldier, Sarge barks, scanning the intersecting corridors with his flashlight. From the left, a beam of light dances towards them as Rodriguez and Alan come barreling towards them, their faces pale and sweaty. Sarge breathes a sigh of relief as he taps Rodriguez on the shoulder. What the fuck is going on, Sarge? Rodriguez demands as they regroup. No fucking idea, Sarge admits, his face full of fear. But damn if we're not sticking around to find out. It's like something is hunting us. Every time we turn a goddamn corner, it's there, Alan says as he spits on the floor. Stay together, Sarge says while looking them in the eye. We find another exit and get the hell out of here. As they press further into the bunker, looking for a way out, the prisoner suddenly lets out an ear-splitting scream as he drops to his knees and starts clawing at his face. No escape! No escape, he wails, his voice breaking. What the hell's wrong with him, Morales says as he grabs the prisoner's arms to pull him up. From the shadows ahead, a guttural growl travels through the corridor. The men take aim in unison, their weapons trained on the dark void ahead. Rodriguez, take the rear. Alan, cover the front, Sarge says in as firm a voice as he can muster. The squad moves into formation and slowly start down the corridor, weapons moving in all directions as the growl grows louder with each step. Without warning, Alan screams. Alan, Sarge shouts, running ahead. But Alan was no longer there. His flashlight lay on the ground, its beam focused on the wall. "Where the hell did he go?" Rodriguez asked in a trembling voice. Sarge picks up the flashlight, his hands shaking. "He was right here." "Spread out. Find him. He can't be far." They all fan out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they search the area for Alan. Rodriguez stops suddenly. "Sarge, over here," he says as he trains his light on the drag marks left on the dusty floor. Sarge rushes over, his heart pounding. What the hell dragged him away? Before anyone can answer, a massive, inhuman roar erupts from the corridor, sending shivers down their spines. "We are not following that," Sarge says with wide eyes. "Move. If we find another exit, then we'll come back for Alan. Understood?" The men all nod in unison and retreat to another corridor. The air in the bunker grows heavier with each step. The activity had escalated and the group was unraveling. "Keep moving," Sarge barks, though his voice strains. Rodriguez and Morales exchange looks, the fear evident in their eyes. The prisoner whimpers incoherently, his steps faltering as they make their way through the maze of corridors. Suddenly, a deafening screech tears through the air, metallic and guttural, like steel being torn apart by unseen hands. "What the hell was that?" Rodriguez shouts, spinning around with his rifle raised. But before anyone can answer, Morales is ripped from their formation. He flies through the air and slams into the wall with a sickening thud. "Morales!" Sarge yells, running towards him. But before he reaches him, Morales is dragged away screaming into the darkness. The group all scream and begin to run after him, but he is long gone, vanishing into thin air. The group then turns and runs down a separate corridor, the prisoner trailing behind them like a broken marionette, the flashlights barely illuminating the path, casting long shadows on the walls. The bunker's atmosphere was suffocating now, the temp plummeting as their breath mists in the air. "There," Rodriguez shouts as he spots the faint outline of the central chamber's doorway. They start running towards it, but just as they reach the entrance, Sarge stops abruptly. He turns towards the corridor they just came from, his eyes scanning back and forth. "Something's here," he says in a whisper. "What do you mean, Sarge?" Rodriguez asks, panic rising in his voice. Without warning, shadows surge forward like a tidal wave, followed by a powerful gust of wind. Before Sarge could react, he's yanked backwards into the darkness, his screams echoing briefly before being cut off. "Sarge!" Rodriguez screams, lunging forward, but the prisoner stops him. "No, he gone. We go. Now," he says, pulling Rodriguez along with him. Rodriguez starts to protest, but then falls in line and starts to run into the chamber. The metal door buckles slightly, and a sharp crack echoes through the chamber. Whatever force on the other side wasn't stopping. As they both back into the room, the prisoner starts pointing frantically to the far wall. "There, get out," he stammers in broken English. Rodriguez squints in the dim light. He shines his flashlight over to where the prisoner points, at an uneven section of the wall. At the base was a small, jagged opening, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. "What the fuck? That wasn't there before," Rodriguez says, looking around as if he's seen everything for the first time. "Let's go," he says as he pulls the prisoner and orders him to start clearing it out. The prisoner drops to his knees and begins removing the loose debris blocking the passage as Rodriguez helps while keeping his rifle trained on the door. "Faster," he yells to the prisoner. Finally, they cleared enough space to crawl through. "Go," Rodriguez says as he pulls the prisoner into the space. The prisoner hesitates as they both glance back at the door. The shadows were forming grotesque shapes that writhed and clawed at the air. With a cry of terror, the prisoner dives into the hole. Rodriguez follows close behind, both dragging themselves through the narrow space. The rough edges of the wall scrape their arms and legs, but they don't dare slow down. As they both see a faint light up ahead, Rodriguez lets out a scream as he feels something grab his ankle and pull with a force he's never felt before. He's pulled back, and as he sees the chamber come into view, he blinks, and then nothing. The prisoner crawls out of the space and looks around the chamber before a small smirk forms on his face as he turns and fades away. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in today. Old wartime ghost stories are one of my favorites. with Asian, ghost stories are very close behind. They can be stories, movies, either English or foreign. There's just something so creepy about them that takes it to another level. Tell me, what are some of your favorite ghost stories, and what settings do you like? Is it your typical haunted house, or maybe a haunted school is more your speed? I'm curious to know. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.